You're 13.
What do you mean? Who's the theater club?
13 schools.
Huh?
13 schools. 13 different associations. 13.
Oh, really?
You got the
Oh. No, I was wondering if they had one of the performances. Yeah. From the theater over there. Yeah, of course.
Did you see the app rally?
If we, as of today.
Two more there, and then probably 3 Stratford. Yeah, she'll turn 18.
Get out of the way.
She'll do 4 years in Stratford.
Hey.
You all right?
You're moving a little slow.
Yeah. This is pretty good. We took the enrollment today. So chapel actually goes down. And then and they're the both.
Karen, you get reassigned again?
Johnson goes up to 92%.
Oh,
Don't come looking for me at Frank's. Always welcome over there, but.
Hey, Chris, what's up? Long time no see. Yeah. Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Teresa's just printing up some papers once she gets back in.
Busy first week in November. All the schools are doing veterans events. Last year, you guys had a great one. Bunnell's got their annual one. Franklin's doing one.
I got a notice from Vanell.
Nichols.
I didn't know it was that. No, alumni. So good for also alumni.
I don't get the word out. We're gonna promote it. They sent me a flyer. Alan, I was at Vanell recently. Yeah. Walk in and your daughters, they're getting ready to do a field trip to West Point. What's your name? Ken Mark son.
Oh, yes, right, for the unified.
She got all excited when she saw me, because she recognized me.
Yeah, they did.
We didn't go at the same time, so.
Oh,
No, no.
Yeah, they did a whole kickoff jamboree for unified, and I think they brought together like 8 towns.
Yeah. And we had a meeting with, like, the principal and, I forget her name, about the veterans, that lunch that they do.
Katie Groff.
Yeah, Katie and, I think it was somebody that's helping her.
It used to be Kirsten, but Kirsten is that what?
Yeah, she's not doing it anymore.
Yeah, she's a Worcester.
I can't think of her name. But they like to be very well organized.
It is a good, it's an organized event.
Yeah.
It really is. And Newmeyer does, so, when you met Newmeyer, culinary.
Okay, yeah.
They do all the food for the Thursday or Sunday.
And then Stratford, that was the first one we did last year at Stratford. They did a great job. They did like a little breakfast and a lunch after and a supper. It was.
I haven't been to one yet.
No.
Trying to get this year.
I think it's Tuesday the 12th for you guys.
It's election day.
Yeah, that's election day.
What's election day?
Fifth.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So it's called freeze, right? I mean, they put a lot
Yeah.
of time into that stuff.
He's practicing now.
Yeah.
We're gonna put it off.
Yeah.
You're gonna march in the parade?
Oh, that's right,
That's Saturday the 9th.
that's right. Yeah, we just did that.
Second annual.
Yes.
This is new.
Okay, is it Memorial Day that you announced this?
Yeah. Veterans Day, they did one last year, this is the second one. Starting, it's nice short, town hall to Academy Hill.
Nice.
Comes with the territory, right?
Yeah.
Saturday the 9th at 10
I didn't
o'clock.
print this one, it's too big.
That's so good. It's pretty.
That you just put.
That's his chart.
That level of
Who's in what schools.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, you probably cut some of the cards.
Okay. That passes out? Okay.
We'll need a few more, we ran,
You ran out?
we'll need more.
Yeah, she's still printing it.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
fine.
5 more.
Rich fellow?
So, no, he's got a boyfriend in first college tonight.
More on what? Oh. Which story are you?
Yeah. And then this too.
Yeah. I thought you just would want to know.
Should we ask chatbot the best way to do this?
I know, we just went through an engaging AI professional development, because we have to have task force at every school. So Mike learned all about chatbots today.
Kinda creepy.
Well, the scary part is like kids who, that's their friend now? I mean, you can have a
Yeah.
conversation, the guy doing it's having a conversation.
Kids, I'm pretty sure Miss Borges is friends with one.
Jill
I
might,
met them.
Jill might have been a witness.
I met them, yeah.
They don't have a name.
They don't have a name, so that's why I'm calling them.
Yep.
Oh, boy.
Haven't seen you in weeks.
Where you been?
I think this is the same as this was.
Teresa, did you have enough of the big one for me? Teresa? It's right there. And I'll throw you back. Here, you can have mine, because I can get it.
Ask and you shall receive.
I know.
Heather, do you wanna, join us down here and kind of guide us through these?
Can, but you know.
Well, you might have some more insight into some of this.
Can I guide you from here? Because I have my computer.
Whatever you feel more comfortable with.
I feel more comfortable here.
Okay. All right, so, to call the meeting to order at 6:35. We do have a quorum, look for acceptance of the meeting, the minutes for September 16th, 2024, moved by Ms. Earp.
Mr. Henry,
Yes, ma'am.
with regard to the minutes, these minutes are really incomplete. Last meeting, I had raised the question of the Franklin Satellite District, and we had a lot of discussion around that, and I expressed to you the challenges of some of my families, but none of that is captured in the minutes.
Okay.
So in my view, it's just incomplete.
Okay. Well, the minutes should be just a synopsis of the meeting, I know.
But we talked about that at length, and nothing is even mentioned in the
So would you like to
minutes
amend it to have?
I would like it amended to reflect the discussion that we did have,
Okay.
you know? And not only that, in follow-up to that discussion, we did get this lengthy email about why it can't really happen, but that's a whole other, issue. but, it needs to be reflected in the minutes, what was discussed.
Okay.
We can make that. I can make that.
Okay, and was it wasn't this meeting, it was a different meeting? wasn't
It was last,
No, I'm just saying the bylaws was the one I thought, yeah, there was another one. Okay, yeah, all right, we'll, maybe too, we could, add some of that stuff. But typically, so just everybody's aware, meetings, and if you look at Robert's Rules of Order, minutes are a synopsis, of just highlights of the actions that were taken, not necessarily reflecting. But typically Teresa usually includes all that stuff, so, I'll have her, try to clarify them for you, and then we can look at them at the next meeting. All right, so the discussion, redistricting. If you can, Ms. Borges, if you can go through just some of those papers we have.
I mean, everything you received were requests that you made regarding information about siblings, like how many siblings might be affected if you were to keep the high schools, at the current high schools that they're at, and not swap them. So when you're looking at that, Teresa, do you remember exactly what each of her acronyms on top of that form stood for?
I know that she had, I don't have that form in front of me right now, but it was great.
Well, it's sibling 1 grade level. So when you see sib 1 GL, that's sibling 1 grade level, and then sibling 1 school.
Yes.
So you're looking at the sibling, like this sibling 1's grade level is 1st grade, 3rd grade, 12th grade. The school is X, Y, and Z. So she was trying to show you what students would be affected for siblings. So it's a very complicated long form, and so yes, there would be siblings affected is essentially what you're seeing here, okay? So when you were thinking about that, you may think about something along the lines of, if you are gonna allow high school students to finish, you would be saying, I'm allowing high school students to finish, however, siblings must follow their pathway. Unless you wanted to say, high school students and all of these siblings get to stay. So it then just becomes a larger group impacted by the decision you make there. So that's one of the sheets you received. Then you also wanted to know a little bit about, and again, yeah, go ahead.
Clarify that, on the impact and so forth, I didn't get that.
So you have all these siblings that are in grade 1, and their current sibling is at Bunnell, okay? With the redistricting, that Bunnell student's new address says they should go to Stratford High. This group talked last year about saying, well, you're already in high school, just finish high school, we'll make everybody else move, right? If you allow that student to stay at Stratford High, you have to make a decision about whether their sibling also gets to stay at their current school, or whether their sibling needs to move. So if you said high school students can stay, but siblings have to move, parents are gonna have their high school student on one pathway and their sibling on another. And what I think is important that you notice in here is there are some families with 5 kids.
Right.
So, those are the tough decisions we need to make, right? Whereas if you say everybody has to move, everybody has to move. You say high school students can stay, you say high school students can stay, but siblings must still move. Okay, so you wanted the data, so now you have that to look at. Then, and Susan Hughes really struggled to get you the racial data because it was really difficult to do without kindergarten. So she felt that is an impactful comment for you to know that this data that you received about what the racial percentages at students of color at each school would be is based on no kindergarten students. Because you don't know who enrolls in kindergarten yet. We don't open our kindergarten enrollment until January, okay? So just know that these numbers could change if a large portion of kindergarten students enrolled in that school, that would affect them, okay? In addition to that, she also wanted to make sure that when you looked at the enrollment report, I don't know if it actually looks like she did print you an updated one. The printed one seems like it's an updated one. Initially, when she emailed the information, the original enrollment report was still from September. Okay, but what you can see on these are not just about the racial balance, but it's also showing you, Johnson's a great example. Their racial balance goes up a point, right? But the number of students goes down to 400 and they go down 100 students. So it's about us thinking about this as a group and weighing the pros and cons of some relief to some schools with the racial impact. And if you can remember back to the SLAM presentation, that's why it was still, I think, an orange tab or a yellow tab. It wasn't perfect. But he did say we will never go below impending because the percentage in town makes that impossible for us to be able to do that. So that kind of is what breaks that down for you. So you're looking at the number of reduced students, again, minus kindergarten, okay? And you're looking at the difference in our students of color percentages at each school. Does that make sense?
So this is based on, it says, you're talking about the 9, 10, 24, or 2020, 2025, 2026 chart?
We've got two charts, Mike, that look like the enrollment chart.
Yep.
Okay, this chart only shows you the difference in the amount of students and students.
Two things to that I have a question about. One, you were just said that she took out the kindergartners on the second chart. So if you're saying, using Johnson as the example, 100 less students, that's at least 2 kindergarten classes
Right.
that would be added in. So that's at least 40 students if we're,
Yeah, so remember when they did the projection, Johnson went down about 80. Not
yeah, so
100
not
plus.
100.
Yeah.
And the second thing to that, on my chart, Johnson went up 2% from,
Or 2 points, yeah.
yeah, 2 points. And so it's all the schools that are in pending imbalance, Franklin, Johnson, and Wilcoxon, they all move in the wrong direction of what our goal is. So I think that's something that we really need to look at.
As far as?
Racial balancing,
Okay.
students of color, they all, whether it be up or down, so Johnson goes up, Franklin goes up, Wilcoxon goes down. So I think those are all things, Wilcoxon goes up, but
Yeah,
not enough
Wilcoxon
to
goes up.
impact it positively.
So and just remember, this is the,
you grasp that?
Yeah, so I made myself a chart because I wanted to make sure that I can understand where all these numbers are going. So if you look here, Chapel, and this, if we took this today and we rolled with scenario 1, that's what we're going with. Today, Chapel's at 70% students of color, and if we went with scenario 1, it'll be at 67% students of color, so it goes down. Which, as a district, we're at 76% students of color. So it negatively goes to our goal of trying to balance. Lordship goes up from 67 to 72, so that's good. Second Hill Lane is equal, doesn't go up or down, so that's good. It's at 76%. Eli Whitney is at 69% if we go with scenario 1, from 65, so it goes up. Nichols currently is at 82, and it will be at 84%. So that's 8 points higher than the district average. Wilcoxon is currently at 55% students of color, and will go to 58% students of color. So it goes up 3 points. Johnson's currently at 90% students of color, and will go up to 92% students of color, which is significantly higher than our town average. Franklin's at 90% and will go up to 91% students of color, also higher than our current average.
So I think when they did the presentation, there were certain classifications, impending, or
So two-
all of our schools based on the scenario.
so you have 2 factors that you need to remember. The first factor is SLAM's primary purpose was to have a school fit rate. So the primary purpose was to equitably distribute children so our class sizes are equal. The secondary was to make sure while doing that, we weren't going to become in trouble with the state for our students of color. And he was very clear when he presented that because Stratford's percentage is 76% and you add 25% in either direction, you are still safe. That Stratford, no matter what happened to your schools, would not go above impending, okay? I don't disagree that we should always try to make them more balanced, but when you asked for scenario 1 and the top priority was to better fill our schools, to have a fill rate that was a closer percentage, that's the scenario they gave you. They gave you a scenario that evens out the classes so that our schools that are overpacked go down, and our schools that are underfilled get more students.
So to be within the state's parameters using that 25%, we would need to be between 51% and 101%.
Yes, which is
So-
why they said you will never, he said, you're never going to end up over 101%,
Right.
right? So you're still safe. Does that mean you shouldn't strive for better percentages? Does that mean in future years, after, this is in place for 4 or 5 years, that you won't see a better? You might. But our rate of students of color are increasing in general in our town. So our percentage is going to continue to go up in our town. So I just think it's good for you to think about. I don't personally think you throw out a plan because of this hiccup, because I believe it's more important for us to get our class sizes under control.
Well, and our goal was to be within the state guidelines of racial balance.
Which we are.
And which we are.
But we are right
We
now,
are
Chip.
impending, we are in the impending.
We're impending,
run.
yeah.
So we are on a red flag or yellow
You
flag
are
for the
not in
state.
any trouble for impending. Impending is where the state allows you to be with no intervention.
Yep, but you're still on the radar.
Absolutely.
Clarify impending.
I
I
think
think it's
that's
20 to 25%.
Yeah.
right here, I have it.
It puts you on like there's a tier 2 and a tier 3 watch list, and then when you crack the 25, you're like basically under remand to come up with a remediation program to correct this.
You must hire somebody to redistrict to fix it.
Heather, quick question, just for clarity. Based on the 76 plus the 25, Stratford could technically have a 100% school of color elementary school, and we would be in
You would
compliance.
still be impending. Which is still considered in compliance. You're impending, right? And again, we should address that. But I'm always very sensitive to this issue, too, because I have spent a little time with Mr. Conrad at Franklin, who has always had a high percentage of students of color, and that community does not want to be disrupted. They love going to that school. So you also have to remember that we have to honor our communities in that area too, and by keeping your community schools intact, you're allowing for that community environment. So it's not always a negative to have a high percentage of students of color, as evidenced by the climate, if any of you have ever visited Franklin. The climate there is amazing.
So we're definitely in compliance right now with the state, correct?
We are, yes.
So then why would we have a red flag at Stratford?
Just we're impending, so that's why there was a newspaper article that we were in the impending imbalance on 3 of our schools. They're outside, they're in the impending realm, 15 to 25% deviation from our town average.
But the state allows us to go to 25% and still be within the guidelines.
So we're in line. right?
Yeah, we are still in compliance. We're not in trouble. We don't have to come up with a plan. The state's not giving us. We do have 3 schools that are impending.
Yeah,
And when you
understand.
look at your,
We are still held
Well,
in this.
the major driving factor of doing this was, we have schools with 60% students, 64%, I think, and schools with 100%.
Well, then, either we're gonna do racially balanced, or you're gonna look and make students to fill the schools. I mean,
Right.
it's 2 different things here.
Well,
They are.
scenario 1 addresses 2 things. It helps address, it keeps us within compliance, which we are, of the racial balancing, and it better
But
distributes.
some schools are going up and other schools are coming down.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's gonna happen
Well,
on
it
a
doesn't
daily.
improve it.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think we need to understand that this is a multi-layer, multi-tiered problem, and we're only gonna solve so many issues now with what we're doing with this redistricting, and then after that, there's gonna be many more conversations to be had. In one of the SLAM reports, they put in there that there's 9 approved housing complexes already gone through zoning in Stratford. 7 of the 9 are in the Johnson House neighborhood. So we're gonna get this done, it's gonna feel good, we're gonna take a pause, and very quickly, in short order, there's gonna be more to talk about.
But the other part is those housing projects are all 2 bedrooms for the most part. And if you study the statistics, 2-bedroom apartments don't typically put kids into a school system. If you look at like, Avalon, it was Avalon Bay. Very few kids from Avalon Bay came, because 2 bedrooms don't typically, if you study the history, 2 bedrooms don't typically put kids in the class. So just because we have development in a community doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna have an impact.
There was a bump initially from Avalon, but then it did average out and kind of go to the numbers that get talked about.
I just
so.
think you just need to keep in mind what we asked Lam to do. We asked Lam to prioritize filling our schools equitably, and they did that. We asked them to do that while making sure we are keeping in line with our students of color and racial balance. And they did that, and they were very clear when they presented that we will always have 2 schools at a minimum that will still be impending. That will always happen. No matter if we stay with that community-based model, right? If we don't say we're gonna uproot everybody and 1,000 kids are gonna get shifted because we're gonna go away from community schools and we're gonna do satellite schools, you're gonna have that racial imbalance.
So impending isn't necessarily a bad thing, because what I'm grasping is there at Johnson House, these are walkers that are within
Yes.
their proximity, they're not getting on a bus.
No.
Some are.
So, but for the, well, if you could speak to that, for the most part.
I mean, so Johnson House, for the number of students we have 4 buses. Franklin, 1, 2 vans. So truly community schools for the size of the schools regardless, it's mostly neighborhood. To share a little back when I was at Chapel with Carla, my original first 3 years before we redrew lines, we had a lot of students who came from the Johnson House area. We had 12 buses and 5 vans, 6 vans, yeah, that every day went to Chapel.
Wow.
And how did that work for your after-school activities?
Well, I think Carla spoke to that, you know.
So, we're talking right now about the 21 students that are still being bused up to Chapel. If you go back to not community schools, just to simply get a better racial balance, you're now making it an inequitable opportunity for families and students to participate in their school's activities. So I think it's really important for you to think about why we asked Lam to prioritize filling our schools equitably so that we don't have one school at 98% full and another school at 67% full.
So, and I just want to remind everybody, the first thing I said when we on that is, scenario 1 has been selected. We are implementing scenario 1. The question is, how do we implement scenario 1? I know one of your concerns, one of my concerns was that splinter group over from Franklin. I know we had looked at that, and there was some information that went out about just the movement, and in order to go back, we need to redraw everything, but I know Susan was looking at maybe ways of shifting some of those kids, or?
It's really challenging. So Slam gave, a little explanation of why it's hard to move those 21 kids that everybody saw, right? If that is something you want to do within scenario 1, I do think we would have to ask Slam to redo pieces of the boundary lines, because in order for you to do that, basically how I understood it is, right now he gave you a number of students you're affecting, 424 students are being affected by this change, right? To take those 21 kids and put them in Franklin doesn't have the space to absorb them by themselves. So that means you gotta go to the other side of Franklin, whether it's the bottom towards Lordship or the top towards another school, and you gotta shift them in. Nichols can't take on that many if you are to shift them to Nichols, which means you then have to cut a line of Nichols and shift it to Wilcoxon, and then you're gonna have to cut a line of Wilcoxon and shift more Wilcoxon up to Chapel. So it's going to make you have to make what would be kind of minor line adjustments, right? But you could impact now 600 plus students instead of the 424 you're impacting. I'm not saying it's not worth it. I'm giving you the hard facts of understanding that if you absorb those 21 students.
49.
Is it 49?
49.
I looked up a lot of numbers this week. So
Yeah, I
it's
know,
the,
49.
on scenario 1, Carla, or currently?
Currently, I have 49.
Yes, so on
Right,
scenario 1,
okay,
it's 21.
okay.
So it reduces down to 21, but it's still 21 students affected. So it's a lot for you guys to think about. I'm not saying that that's wrong, and that's why this committee is here, for you guys to make some of these decisions so that we can support our community and make sure we're making, the best decisions possible. Selfishly, as an acting superintendent, right now, I want our class sizes to be more equitable. That's my priority. My priority is making sure that our teachers, that we are giving some relief to our overpacked schools and shifting some of these lines, trying to keep the community base as much as possible, and that we are able to equitably distribute our class sizes. That's super important for the elementary level learning.
freeze.
And I know that the main focus of all this is, you know, at the elementary level. It does trickle up though to, you know, to middle, by shifting lines. I think it may naturally balance the middle schools because if you'd be shifting stuff, say up, on a map, you know, the zones would shift toward flood. And the reason that I asked for, you know, the number of kids in the flex zone,
Yep.
was to see if that zone could just all go to flood. It's 25 kids. If those 25 kids, like on paper, obviously, if those 25 kids went to flood that are in the flex zone, we would go from a 56 student difference between Flood and Worcester to a 6 student difference between the two schools.
And that's huge.
Yeah, and if you took all of Wilcox in 6th grade, which used to go to Flood, the whole thing is looks like it's about 36 kids based on this. So it would be a 16 kid total difference, and Flood would be more, 515 versus 499. So it's, you know, those are both within the realm of possibility. It seems like, if, you know, and even if Wilcox, and you took the 36 6th graders and you split it in half based on some, you know, arbitrary line. Some elementary schools in different towns, they do go to different middle schools and then they're back together for high school. You know, if you did, even 18 would be a relief to.
We used
it
to
would
do
add
that
us and-
at Johnson, it used to
Yeah.
be split.
Right.
And so what Greg is suggesting is that, you know, you don't change scenario one, but you change their pathway, right? To make sure that we are making sure that middle school becomes a little more balanced.
And
Under this
thus high
scenario,
school.
and thus high school, because
Yeah.
under this scenario, in 3 years, our high schools will be a little more balanced. Right now, Stratford High has 100+ students more than Benel. And they're not, you know, they're similar size-wise, we shouldn't be that far off. And the same for our middle schools, they're about 100 students off each way. And it will take a few years to get you guys balanced, but that's,
What's the space utilization of the two schools based on scenario one?
that was in the presentation, I don't have it in front of me, but he did the utilization in there. And Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe both middle schools were still around 85% used.
I believe so, yeah.
So the utilization is, the percentage is equal, not necessarily the number.
Yeah, it's also, you have to think about usable space. I believe Greg's school is a little bigger, but maybe
Less.
not as user-friendly.
Hmm, maybe. But the percent, and I understand what the number is and the exact, you know,
Yeah.
student count, but percentage-wise.
Right. But class size wise, you know, there is, clearly there's gonna be larger class sizes at, Worcester. than
There is.
Mhm.
You know, with 56 more kids, there has to be, so, you know, we're talking about class sizes at the elementary level, you know, with us, it goes from, you know, those 8 schools to 2, 8 or 9 schools, however you look at it, to 2, so it's, you know, whatever, if the feeders are all bigger going to Worcester, then Worcester's gonna be more.
Right.
Mm.
Right now, if I get a registration for Stratford High School, that student is almost guaranteed to have 4 study halls in the first semester, because the classes are full. Because there are 164 students more than Benel. And they have 91.4 teachers, and Benel has 91.1 teachers. So they don't have more teachers, but they have 100 more students, so their classes are bigger.
And it's interesting that Benel is 76 students less this year than last year. That's a big number.
Yeah. Yeah. And he said that we were gonna have some bubbles in high school. If you remember, there was like some elementary bubbles that are now floating up to the high schools, but it is significant. You know, when you're an AP at Stratford High School and you're a school counselor and you're trying to schedule students and the fill rate is too high at one school. And, you know, so we just have to think about those things because, you know, it matters about your class size. It matters in elementary school whether you have 20 kids in your first grade class or 24. I know 4 kids seems like nothing, but it's a lot.
So, Mr. Rodriguez, does this proposed flex zone of flood, does it achieve the utilization and does it create a more simpler pathway? What does it
So
achieve?
So the flex zone one would increase transportation costs. I don't know what
Yes.
Wilcoxon would do, it's much closer to flood than the flex zone. Generally, the Wilcoxon area is much closer. Like I said, Wilcoxon used to flow into, it used to be one of our feeder schools a number of years ago. So that would be, you know, you would still have transportation, but it would be, you know, the same as it probably would be to go to Worcester. Some of those kids probably walk to Worcester, but not, I wouldn't imagine the ones that are on the other side of, Main Street probably don't. Like closer to East Main Street, that's Wilcoxon, but I don't think they walk to Worcester from there.
So you,
They probably have buses.
you're saying you think that these flex zone, the Lordship flex zone kids should go to,
Well, if they went to Flood, that one would have a transportation cost to it, I think probably more so than Wilcoxon,
okay,
just because of, you know, they're just further away geographically.
Would bell times be affected?
and the reason why we would consider it would be more because of staffing, equal dispersion to the staff?
Class sizes,
Class sizes.
and again, filling with Greg's idea, he doesn't have to wait 3 years for this scenario to work out to balance Worcester and Flood, right? If we say, if you are a flex zone person who's in that little flex zone they developed at Johnson for Lordship, anybody in the flex zone goes to Flood. When you're done your elementary school, you're going to Flood. So he's saying, if you take those students, yes, it might be a transportation cost on where they live, but instantly, that following year, Greg's gonna balance his school a little closer to Worcester.
Because like, you know, like Heather said about the number of staff, we have the same, two schools have pretty much the exact same staff, Flood and Worcester, with, you know, they have 55, 56, just more, you know, more kids there.
It's a lot for everyone to think about.
Yeah.
And I love that you're putting so much thought and effort into it because it's important to our families. And change is really hard. Any change.
Quick question, for the increase that I'm gonna be getting at Chapel, is it evenly across all the grade levels, or will I have more fourth grade or fifth grade?
It looked pretty evenly, but I
Okay.
can definitely, we can have Susan share that spreadsheet.
Oh, okay.
Nothing glared at me, Carla.
Oh,
There was
okay.
not like, oh, you're gonna need 4 of this grade and only 2 of that grade. It was a pretty even,
Oh,
straight
okay.
sled.
So these kids in this flex zone would be coming from, it looks like about 4 or 5 different elementary schools?
So the flex zone, they're at Stratford Academy right now with a couple at Second Hill Lane, but I'm gonna guess that the one at Second Hill Lane is probably in dual language.
And then they got some Lordship as well?
Yeah, meaning like you're in the flex zone already and you're going to Lordship.
Mhm.
So technically, remember that flex zone is supposed to be the, again, something you need to think about,
Mhm.
you know, how we are choosing within that flex zone, whether you go to Johnson or whether you go to Lordship. It's a flex zone, so it's supposed to give us that flexibility to help with our enrollment. So just keep that in mind, that that's the zone you're talking about.
So hypothetically, if we were to move this group and send them to Flood as opposed to Worcester, if we were to, I know, and then we looked at those Franklin kids, the 22 kids, and creating some type of a system where we could offer them options, was that something?
I mean, again, you guys are welcome to consider any of those things, but anytime you're gonna offer options, someone's gonna say to you, why am I not getting an option? Why am I not getting an option? So you just have to remember that it has to be something that we are willing to deal with. Whatever you put in place, whether you put a policy in place that says, no matter which school you're placed at in the flex zone, you are a Flood middle schooler, that's a policy that we have to implement. If we say the 21 students that are being bused up to Chapel have options to pick a different school, you're gonna have more people who are gonna want some options.
Well, and that would only be that small splinter group, and it's only because one of, in my opinion, just my opinion, but that small group of kids are getting bused up to Chapel, and that's kind of the thing we try to
Right.
eliminate with the scenario one, is
But
to.
remember, if they all try to waiver into Franklin will be over capacity.
No, I know, and, or whether it was Franklin or Lordship or something closer, so.
You could definitely recommend a policy that says anyone in that bus flex zone may apply for a waiver,
Yeah.
and if space is available, but, you know, another point of this was to get rid of waivers.
No, and this would be only, and again, only in my opinion, but this would only be for that specific group, because the way this plan is laid out, they're kind of,
They're left out, yeah, I get
they're
it.
isolated, so. And then the other part for me would be, personally, I'm not in favor of grandfathering anybody in outside of maybe the high school. And the question for me would be, originally my opinion was, if you're going into 11th or 12th grade and you can be grandfathered into your high school, anything below, but then there was some conversation, do we grandfather everybody who's in high school now and let them finish their high school career in that school, but siblings go to their new school no matter what. My two kids, my two stepkids went to two different high schools in town, so, you know, I'm not asking somebody to do, and it was a decision that we had made, but I'm not asking somebody to do something that I didn't have to go through myself, and I kind of have an experience with it, but, to me, that would be the third issue, you know, is what do we do? What do we do with the grandfathering? I don't believe that we should grandfather sixth graders. I think it should be, you know, only up to high school, my opinion. And then the question would be, do we do the entire, everybody who's in high school as of now gets to continue, the new kids go on? Or do we pick a grade and say, you know, maybe it's just your senior year, maybe it's just your last 2 years? So, I don't know, what are your thoughts on?
So Mike, how we originally got here is because we explored the option of converting to a 6, 7, 8 model. That's originally how we started going on this path, right?
That was one of the options we looked at when we started on this path.
Right.
We don't have the space to make that happen. It's the desire and belief, I think, of most of the people in the K through 8 schools, that it was 75%, who believe sixth graders should be with the 7, 8, 9 instead of the K through 5s. But that's not a possibility at this point.
Right, so at this time, we don't have the necessary infrastructure to do that.
Nope.
But this is a stopgap so that we can reevaluate that at a later time, possibly.
Possibly. I mean, that scenario right now is off the table.
Right.
And we can, if the town, the board, whatever decides they want to make the move.
It would be a major construction project at a lot of cost.
Yeah, so that would be maybe down the road. I don't think that, I mean, I got a year left on the board, I don't think my time would allow for that to get even initiated, so that piece of it wouldn't be, but it's, so the question is, do we grandfather anybody? Do we just say everybody, you know, starting next year goes to their new school? Do we say certain, and I would be against that. I would think if you're, you know, at least a senior, maybe a junior, moving into those, you could stay. But I wouldn't personally be in favor of grandfathering any other grades except possibly the high school.
Mike, what happens when you get somebody in sixth grade who's got a second grader, and a third grader, they take the school back and forth with their parents? And now all of a sudden you're gonna take them and move them out of the school? And what happens to the parents having that older child bring the other kid to school?
So all of the elementary schools, well, again, I don't think we should grandfather anybody. Everybody shifts to where they should be. So if they're in the same high school, the brother, if they're in sixth grade and second grade, they're gonna go to the same school.
But if they're a freshman and an eighth grader, and then they move up to ninth grade, and then their sibling goes here and their other sibling goes to the other school, if your grandfather the whole high school.
Well, and that's what I said, we did that with my family.
Yeah.
And again, is it, you know, and I think, Heather, you've had some parents who've called up and said, you know, I know my kid's going to this school when this redistricting happens, I want my kid to go to that school now, I want to help with that transition now. So some of the parents are in favor of it. And to that point then, do you just say nobody gets grandfathered? But I think seniors, at the very least seniors, maybe those becoming juniors should be able to, you know, finish in the school they're in. But the parent maybe can make the decision that, you know, they don't want to do that. They want their senior to finish at their brother's or sister's school. That's why I'd ask for the siblings thing too, so we kind of see. But I think there's so many kids that if we started looking at, you know, trying to balance that and do it, I think we'd almost, you know, be doing some of the, in my opinion, we'd be doing some of the families a favor by letting that kid stay and finish high school, but, you know, we can't do everybody a favor by saying you get to pick whatever school you want, wherever you want, you know, it's just, so there's gotta be some, you know, I think family decisions have to be made in that perspective. But, so to me, those are the three questions. So do we do anything with those, that splinter group? Do we move the flex zone over to flood? And then do we grandfather any of the high school? I wouldn't be in favor of, and again, I'm just one vote, but I wouldn't be in favor of grandfathering any other grade outside of maybe some of the high schools, but,
And I really think you guys should think about it. I would not encourage you to make any rushed votes or decisions. I think you have a lot you need to think about, and just keep in mind that redistricting is sensitive. And I really wanna make sure that we are good with the decisions we make. Also, please keep in mind, any decision you make, your building administrators have to implement.
Mike, so on the grandfathering topic, why two? Why not two?
to,
Why two grandfather? Why not two grandfather?
oh,
Mr. Pettion, can you
Thoughts?
speak to that for the high schools?
Yeah, I remember saying last time, just like the connections that they're making, as far as having the school counselor, even with the Portuguese graduate stuff, as far as having that one primary person that they connect to within the school. So I do like that piece of not moving current high school students, but I know that, like what you just brought up as far as like a ninth grader, you might be having that person move to 10th grade, but a younger sibling moving to, as a freshman to 9th grade, now they might be at Stratford and but not high school, so that could be hard on the family too.
I think at the, at the high school level, there's, in addition to the primary person, there's, there's sports, there's the band, there's things that kids are connected to, from, and particularly band from the middle school level. We have middle school kids that play in, the high school bands from 7th and 8th grade, make those connections, and, some of it is together, but, sports especially, that would be, I think that would be a tough sell for a junior to go from one high school to the other, in their, you're switching sides at that point.
yeah.
It's, and that's not an only reason, but I think it has to be, some kind of a consideration, those types of things as well.
Yeah. Especially some of those kids who have a college track that includes that athletic endeavor.
Right.
You might steal that from them, I mean, if they go up there playing on a team, and not to say, playing on a team that's great over one school and a team that's not as good.
Or
and
their particular position has, three kids in
Or four,
that
yeah.
one school, and
And you're being
going
scouted
there,
by
you're
college to come play, whether it's Division III or Division
But
I.
opportunity and, those types of things, so.
You can steal a kid's scholarship.
Well, I can't help but think 1960, when Bunnell opened up, all the Stratford seniors, half of the Stratford seniors had to go to Bunnell. And I recently ran into a graduate, and I said to her, how did everybody react? She said, we were pissed. But they did allow them to have prom together and things together, but they would not allow them to graduate together, which they had asked for. But at that time, they never thought about the team aspect, because at that point, what did they do?
Right. Yeah, so that was my thought process on I wouldn't be opposed to grandfathering all kids. My initial thought was just the 2 grades, because they're, entrenched in that school system a little more so, but. And so I would say at this point, unless somebody else has other thoughts or concerns, I would say we should maybe spend the month thinking on the 3 issues, and then come back next month with some discussion and possibly a vote.
Please reiterate the 3 issues.
So it was the splinter group at Franklin,
Okay.
and do we try to create, and it could be something where just because they're singled out, specifically that small group of 22 kids, if we can create like at a superintendent's discretion, and if the space is available, policy that these kids could be moved, on a lottery basis or, grade basis, whatever it might be. Moving the flex zone to flood as their flood, and then that would be Bunnell.
Yeah, you have a choice though, Greg gave you two options, so you're looking at potentially saying flex zone, lordship flex zone students, middle school pathway would be flood, or saying, you said Wilcoxon's sixth grader, Wilcoxon would become a pathway to flood.
But, so then all of Wilcoxon would follow the flood?
Which,
They have 36.
every year they have about 36 sixth graders.
Okay.
40, 36.
So it'd be one of two things, either the
Either the flex or.
flex zone
Wilcoxon.
or the Wilcoxon.
Yeah, Wilcoxon, I would imagine, would have lower transportation costs just because it's closer to
Okay.
flood, but I don't know the.
But you're
ins and outs of
impacting
that.
an entire school versus a flex zone.
Right.
Yeah.
So, just, those are some things for you guys to really think about, and then any other grandfathering.
And then number three would be, the high school students, which ones, if any, we would be willing. And again, I'm one vote, if you guys, I would disagree, but if you guys said we should do other grades, or I would wholeheartedly disagree with it, but it would come to the, we would send a recommendation back to the board would vote on it as it see fit. In my opinion, it should, and that's just my opinion, just be high school.
Just with that flex zone, pathway and stuff, there's an equity issue with that as well, because that's mixed matching. Your neighbor next door will be going to Johnson, you'll be going to, and then shifting to a different pathway. You're not going with your peers necessarily or your neighbors. So same kind of thing, same situation, a satellite.
I would say
to
that
another.
you're not going with the necessary all of your peers, but you are going with your neighbors, because what we're saying is your neighbors, all the flex zone, the entire flex zone, whether you are zoned to go to Johnson or zoned to go to Lordship, that whole neighborhood that is neighbors with each other are going to flood.
But they might not be in elementary school together, they're not matriculating together.
They may not, you may have some at Johnson and some at Lordship.
So right now, we're saying Wilcoxon or the flex zone to go to flood. You have to
Or
choose.
neither.
Or neither.
But if you
yeah,
do
but-
neither, it's gonna take us 3 years at a minimum to balance the fill rate at our middle schools.
Like he said, 53-47 would be where it ends up. The split between the two middle schools, right now it's 54-46, so it doesn't even really make an impact.
But to your original point, we're looking at this at the numbers, not the percentage. The elementary schools, we're looking at the percentages, but with the high school and the middle schools, we're looking at the numbers because they have equal resources in both schools.
And I just wanna say thank you and commend you, because Stratford, when you look back at its history, you can share history from a redistricting that happened way back when, and we had another redistricting. This team here, you're taking into consideration how the families feel, you're thinking about how you're gonna roll this out, and I think that that is, just from my perspective, very appreciated. Because I don't think families respond well, and they do get angry, I won't use the word Bill used, but people do get angry if, but we're giving people an entire year to adjust and think. So what decisions you do make, people are really getting to process. And so I appreciate your thoughtfulness, I appreciate the engaging questions, and, even just the work you've asked for is awesome to have a group that's actually thinking about it. And we might not be able to solve all the problems, but I feel like you're really trying to be as thoughtful as possible.
In addition, I'd like to thank those staff who aren't part of it necessarily planning and kind of putting your necks out on the line to become a part of this, so.
Carla, how many Franklin students you have?
Right now, she has
49.
49.
Right now. which
Right.
will
Yeah,
shift
right
down.
now, but with this, it's gonna go down to what,
21. Which is still not perfect, right? Still
Yeah.
21 students,
Yeah.
still matters.
So-
All of our students matter.
So is everybody comfortable where we are and taking this next month to, and again, if you send questions through Teresa or through Heather, we can get those answered. If you have questions regarding, these things, comments, thoughts, whatever, again, don't hit reply at all. If you do get something, it's an FOI violation, but, if you have thoughts and you wanna share them with the group, send them through them, they'll get them to us. And, but, I think it's a difficult decision, it sucks that we gotta do this, but it is what it is. It has to be done, we need to have equal.
So Mike, let me ask you a question, so when the board makes this decision, are they gonna have public hearings on any of this, or?
We've had public hearings on this committee, we had public hearings, we had probably about 3 public hearings. We had Slam do, I think, 3 presentations, we went to 3 different schools.
No, I know they did all that, I'm just saying, when you finally make the decision, you're gonna bring it to the public, right?
Well, yeah, it'll be a vote, the public will be able to come and speak at the board meeting, there's a public forum at the board meeting. But we've given ample time for the public to speak throughout, we've been doing this 8 months now?
Yes, but I'm just saying, when the final decision's made, and then they're all made aware of it now.
Well, they're all aware of the fact that we've chosen scenario 1.
I understand it, but they don't know exactly how scenario 1's gonna work, which we're trying to work out now.
Yeah, some of
So-
the details, yeah.
Some of that, I think we're gonna get a lot of feedback against this, no matter which way we go with it, I'm just saying.
Yeah, we had,
So I just wanna know if we're gonna have public get involved with this.
well, the public has been involved and.
Mike, I know they've all been involved, I'm just saying, when you make that decision,
Mm.
and this is the way it is, I think we may have an uproar, or maybe not. I'm just saying, do the people get a chance to come and speak their mind before it gets implemented?
Yeah, we have a public forum at the board meeting.
Okay.
So before we take the final vote at the board meeting, this board will make a recommendation will go to the board, and then the board will have scheduled, at one of its regularly scheduled meetings, included on the agenda. And prior to
The final
that
vote.
agenda item, there's a public forum piece to our meeting, and the public will have opportunity to speak. Yeah, sure.
And I will say too, that it's all about the transition as well. Like the families that will be coming to chapel, already in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm gonna have some kind of a big reception for these families. Like, you know, a letter that have them come to the school, I don't know, just have them, she'll tell them who we are and that sort of thing, just kind of welcome them into the fold. So I just think as a principal, you have to have those plans of transitioning, you just kind of buffers it, helps it.
That's what I'm just saying.
Right,
So
I mean,
think
right,
people go
because you're
crazy.
right, I hear what you're saying.
And you have amazing principals, so if this group can make a decision prior to January, your principals are gonna have the time they need to, you know,
To make those kinds of
Yeah.
plans.
And you need that time,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
they're very busy and they, you know, they're working hard for their community, so that's why we took this whole year, so that you could make these decisions and then we could communicate ahead of time with our families, we could hear feedback. You're never gonna make everybody all the way happy for the redistricting, it'll never happen, there's no perfect scenario. Change is hard.
Just a little.
So Mike, just 2 things real quick, kind of to what Pete was talking about, I think once we make the decision from here, and then it gets put into the minutes as we're making a recommendation to the full board, then the full board meeting is the last Monday of the month. So there'll be about 2 weeks where this will quote unquote be out there, people will be aware that it's going to the Board of Education for action. So I think that's kind of a good thing, the calendar kind of works in our favor in that point. And then my other sort of question was to Heather and yourself as a high school administrator, how much interaction and what is involved in having 8th graders involved already at high school level activities?
I would say with the 8th graders, not as much, besides like some of the things we do with open house. So I would say 8th graders not as much, to make it simple.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have a few pockets of band things
Mhm.
and, you know, there are a couple interactions with activities, that frankly can happen regardless in any,
Okay.
you know, any capacity. I mean, we have some high school sports that are teamed up. There's, you know, a swim team that I think has Benell and Stratford High people on it.
That's right, lacrosse
So,
as well.
right,
Right.
and
And then
we
the-
have the marching bands that are combined between
Right, they're
both
really
schools.
only separate for football
Yes.
season purposes. After
Yes.
that, the band's combined
The
as
bands
one
combined, right.
band.
So, you know, I mean, I think we have to think about that, you know, from a district leadership perspective. I'll have to work closely with the secondary administrators to ensure the opportunities for that collaboration continue.
Okay. No, when I was going to middle school, when I was in Westchester County, they allowed like 8th grade athletes who were really good to play JV level sports.
Yeah, we
At
don't
high
do
school.
that,
They won't do that.
No.
But you know, New York with that county level government, it's a
Yeah.
whole other,
Whatever.
it's a whole other ring of the
Say,
free ring
I don't
service.
wanna-
Yeah, they definitely won't allow that here, so you don't have any of those words, just the
No,
bands.
I was just kind of asking. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would wanna, have an idea, like, once we do come up with a decision for the 3 scenarios, would there be policies in place? Cause I know there's gonna be parents like out there, as well as, students who would like a waiver. I don't know, if we could protect the decision that way, but, that's something to consider. I don't want.
And that is an very important decision of this group, so Mike, you might wanna add that as number 4, because the goal behind this was to have no more waivers. You know,
Would
we have
be
gotten
making a
waiver happy in
recommendation to the
Stratford,
policy
and,
committee?
To the board.
The board?
yeah, so I do believe that there should be, you know, you can put some other language in. You can say they can meet with administration for a superintendent placement, but waivers and the waiver requests cause a lot of headache for our staff and for our principals.
And that's part of what got us into this mess now,
Yes.
we're waivering kids all
Yes.
over the place for a wide variety of reasons.
It becomes school shopping,
Yeah.
right? You're shopping for the school you want, and that is not what public education is about. You know, we are providing you that equitable education at our schools.
Free and appropriate.
For me, I went real estate shopping. I bought my house specifically where it was for the schools.
But what if you were moved?
What's that?
What if you were moved in this redistricting?
So I can see the driveway for Eli Whitney from my driveway, and I can hear the band up and out.
But that's not
And I want it to
necessarily-
be that close for exactly the reason you're talking about.
But that's not necessarily what's happening here. So you
Right.
could be right next to Franklin and still be getting bused to somewhere else.
But there's no guarantee ever that the neighborhood you live in is gonna be the school. You could live.
I realize that, I'm just saying to his point, you can't go with that.
Since my daughters were at Eli, they both have had friends who drove past Rooster every day on their way to flood and ended it out.
Mhm. And also, you could close the school, you could buy a house right next to center school, and then center school gets closed. So you never know what's gonna happen.
Exactly.
You can't guarantee
It's
on
a
that.
roll of the dice.
And I think, you know,
And-
there isn't, there's no guarantee on what will happen in the future, but you're making a decision right now based on a district need. And I think that that's where you keep, you know, I wish I could wave a magic wand and tell you, you'll never have to redistrict again for the remainder of Stratford's existence, right? Probably can't happen.
Well, the
I
vo- the
can
voting.
make 2 more points on the waiver and the things that we were just talking about. One, some of the children that are currently in the elementary school have already moved schools before. This is not their first time being redistricted. So I believe that if it's gonna negatively impact them, again, they should have the option to waiver. And second to that is, what if they have an IEP and they're very comfortable with their setup currently at their current school? I think those things should be considered when we're accepting or not accepting waivers.
Okay. So those are all good points. Fortunately, we have amazing staff in all of our schools, and I think they do a phenomenal job, and they're a very dedicated group of people. I would, believe that in any school here in Stratford, they're gonna get a great education, so, and we're constantly looking to improve the system, so.
I'm not disagreeing with that, I'm more saying that maybe their IEP has something to do with behavioral issues or something along those lines, and they're comfortable with their staff that they're working with currently. So disrupting that could cause more issues for them. I mean, I think you could speak to that, Ms. Borges.
I can speak to that, and I have to respectfully disagree with you, Joe. Because an IEP is written to be implemented anywhere. If your child has an IEP, and you pack up and you move to another town, we have written that IEP so that it can be implemented in any public school district that you are going to. If you have extreme needs for emotion or anxiety, we have programs for that, so you're not being moved because you're in a program.
That's what I'm speaking to.
But we're not moving those kids.
Okay, so that's what I'm trying to
Yes,
speak
so
to, because
those-
that wasn't clear in any of those
Yeah, so
things, so.
students that are in ABA, students that are in sales, Strive, Bridges, they're not moving because they're in a program that's actually considered a program. It's not actually part of that school, right? So
Okay,
programs
so-
are district. But if you have an IEP that requires resource, we have resource in every building, right?
Mhm.
We have speech in every building. We have, so if you have an IEP that dictates services that are those that do not require a specific program, then you can move to any school and receive a beautiful education with the same services.
Okay, that was what I was speaking to, because it wasn't clear in any of that.
I think that had to be clear when it gets sent to the board, so the parents would actually see.
Yeah, because I
Slam
feel like
put
that
that
would be
in
a
the
lot of
presentation.
anxiety for parents that have students.
Slam put that in the presentation, so it says, students that are in a special education program will not be moved. We are not moving any special education programs.
All right, so, our next meeting will be on the first Thursday of the month. I know this is special, we just didn't realize it was a holiday. We did have a meeting, but you guys were off, so we just figured we wouldn't drag you back, so. So it'll be the first Thursday, 6:30.
Seven.
Oh, the 7th of, I thought you said 7th, yeah, the 7th at 6:30. So I look for a motion to adjourn. Mr. Ryan, second by Mr. Levin. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thanks.
Hey, Carla,